Since 1707, Scotland has been a member of the United Kingdom, but that could change in September. The independence debate has been lengthy and controversial, but here are some of the key things you need to know about Scottish independence. One of the most hotly debated topics is the future of the UK's economy. Many experts and notable figures have weighed in on both sides, but here's a breakdown of what they're discussing. Globally speaking, Scotland is a comparatively rich country, considering the population is relatively small, with much of its income generated through tourism and export. The SNP have made promises to improve this income by halving and eventually scrapping air passenger duty tax, which affects most air transport in and out of Scotland. These changes would come with other tax adjustments, in which the SNP plan to axe the bedroom tax and make the country's tax system simpler. The Yes campaign's proposed retention of the pound has sparked fierce debate on both sides of the border, with prominent figures like former Chancellor Alistair Darling stating emphatically that a currency union would not happen. These claims have been described as scaremongering and bluster by First Minister Alex Salmond, and the Yes campaign gained significant support after an unnamed minister in the Better Together campaign told newspapers of course there would be a currency union. Another talking point is the future of Scotland's well-established healthcare services. Under independence, Scotland's National Health Service will continue providing free healthcare for Scots as it has done since 1948. Many argue that if Scotland remains part of the UK, it will become harder to provide the same level of care due to budget cuts and the potential privatisation of the NHS in England. For those who currently live in the borders between Scotland and England, there is much talk of shared services being cut off. However, it has been argued that arrangements are already in place between the different NHS bodies to allow for cross-border care. In an independent Scotland, the state pension age will rise to 66 in 2020, which is in line with the rest of the UK. The SNP have promised to axe Westminster's recent housing benefit changes. Specific proposals include abolishing the bedroom tax, halting the rollout of universal credit and personal independence payments, and also removing single household payments. It has also pledged to ensure that benefits and tax credits increase in line with inflation to stop the poorest families falling further into poverty. In an independent Scotland, vulnerable 2-year-olds and all 3- and 4-year-old children will be entitled to free childcare equivalent to the time spent in primary school. By the end of the second Parliament, an independent government aims to provide 1,140 hours of childcare a year for those aged between 1 and school age. Higher education will remain free for Scottish and European students. However, UK students are still expected to pay tuition fees to prevent universities in Scotland from being overwhelmed. It is estimated that between 30,000 and 90,000 students would cross the border into Scotland to receive free education. However, the SNP have said if Westminster change their policies and provide free education, then they will mirror them. The future of Scottish university research funding has been called into question by ministers on both sides. Our university research in Scotland is recognised as being amongst the best in the world. With 0.1% of the world population, Scottish research received 1.8% of the world's citations. We are ranked first of 27 comparator countries for research impact in relation to GDP. Because of this, the SNP have promised to provide the funds needed, which will enable our researchers and universities to remain internationally competitive. They will also increase efforts to attract funding from Europe by collaborating with European peers and stakeholders to maximise opportunities for research grants and contracts. An independent Scotland's written constitution would bring proposed education and employment rights, including a youth guarantee to employment, education or training. The SNP plan to increase the minimum wage in Scotland for the first time since 2008, to represent the increase in inflation resulting in a higher minimum wage than the rest of the UK. The unemployment rate in Scotland is 6.5%, giving Scotland a lower unemployment rate and higher youth employment rate than the rest of the UK, where unemployment is currently 6.9%. To put it in perspective, there are 285,000 more people in employment today than there were when the Scottish Parliament was established in 1999. During the debate, there has been much talk of businesses getting up and leaving if the majority vote yes, and that an independent Scotland is not an attractive opportunity for investors and businesses, which could leave many people unemployed. However, in recent statements by several large companies, it doesn't look as one-sided as it may seem. The discussion on the Trident programme is a long one, with a recent poll showing only 33% of over 35-year-olds believing that the UK's weapon system should be renewed, Support among 18 to 35-year-olds is even lower at 19%. Holyrood has voted against renewing the Trident programme both in 2007 and 2013, without the Westminster government taking action. However, the Clyde Naval Base, where the nuclear deterrent is housed, is Scotland's single largest employment site, sustaining 6,700 jobs. This figure is projected to rise to 8,200 by 2022. Removing the Trident programme would cost billions of pounds and take many years. NATO Secretary-General Lord Robertson believes that for the second military power in the West to shatter this year would be cataclysmic in geopolitical terms. There are further concerns about Scotland's defence and how it would be funded. The latest figures for Westminster's spending on Scotland's defence are £1.4 billion less than the £3.3 billion the country contributes to the UK's defence and security budget. But the SNP's proposed budget of £2.5 billion for defence, security and cyber capabilities is only 7% of the current UK allocation. After independence, the Westminster Government's £30 million cap on the proceeds of criminal legislation which Scotland can retain will be lifted. Furthermore, we would no longer transfer 75% of the income generated from fines out of Scotland, but would keep the full amount, providing approximately £7 million annually. However, the creation of an independent Scottish state would mean replacing fast and efficient justice and policing arrangements with entirely new processes, which would take considerable time and investment. Some 75% of Scotland's landmass is under agricultural production, making the industry the single biggest determinant of the landscape we see around us. Scotland's farmers, crofters and growers produce output worth around £2.3 billion a year and are responsible for much of Scotland's £400 million of food exports, rising to £2.4 billion if whisky exports are included. Unlike other businesses, farmers are often primarily concerned with their future within the EU, because so much of their finances come directly from Europe. The Yes campaign argues that if Scotland were measured in its own right, it would qualify for higher subsidies than as part of the UK. It is worth noting, however, that neither a yes nor a no vote guarantees EU membership. Renewable energy is the driving force behind making Scotland greener and more sustainable as an independent country. Currently, more wave and tidal power devices are being tested in the waters off Scotland than in any other country in the world, and the renewables industry has created over 9,000 jobs between 2010 and 2013. Alex Salmond is committed to generating 100% of Scotland's energy from renewables by the year 2020, a huge increase from the current 40% generated by renewable sources. The Better Together campaign claim that without the support of the UK, the full costs of supporting large-scale Scottish renewables could cause household electricity bills to rise considerably by up to £189. If Scotland were to become independent, the remaining North Sea oil and gas reserves would belong to Scotland. This would bring a number of benefits, including the ability to reinvest the proceeds for future generations, which the Westminster government has failed to do, a scheme widely adopted by the top 20 oil-producing nations. For example, Norway's government pension fund Global has grown from £212 million in 1996 to £470 billion in 2013. However, parting from the UK would leave us unprotected from drops in oil prices. Leaving 20% of Scotland's income in such a volatile stock is extremely dangerous. If we remain part of the UK, North Sea oil and gas would only take up 2% of our income, a much safer position. The SNP's plan to take responsibility for initiatives such as the Warm Homes discount would allow energy companies to pass savings on to their customers, resulting in a reduction of annual energy bills by 5%, around £70. Currently, however, the costs of transmitting electricity and gas for remote communities and small-scale renewables in Scotland are shared across UK-wide schemes. If these costs were paid solely by Scottish energy consumers, this would add at least £38 to annual household energy prices. This referendum is fast approaching, and the polls swing around a 50-50 split. Only by weighing up both sides of the argument can Scots make the best choice for our future on the 18th of September.